The rise of Genshin Impact has been a surprise, launching first on PlayStation 4 systems and PC, and now today arriving with a full-fledged PS5 release. On PS5 then, upgrades over PS4 include full 60 frames per second gameplay, doubling the refresh of the last gen 30fps target. We're also promised native 4K visuals, boosted graphics settings and even faster loading times, taking advantage of its rapid NVMe storage. It's all great stuff. Now the basics are, Genshin is developed by Chinese studio Mihayo, a free-to-play action RPG built on the Unity engine. The anime styling is simple but charming. It's easy on the eye with beautiful cel-shaded characters, physics-based clothwork, and extra elements like a day-night cycle across a huge open map. The snag is, Unity Engine's use here really pushes the likes of PS4 Pro too far, resulting in a struggling sub-30fps reading. It's a clear blemish on last-gen console releases, gameplay never feels all that smooth, and so the promise of 60fps on PlayStation 5 is a pretty big deal. But can it really achieve it at a native 4K, or are there still issues? And what of the loading time improvements? Let's find out. Today I'm focusing mostly on the performance side of Genshin, being the area most in need. Before we kick off though, there is an extra twist to the PS5 release in that the console already had partial support before the full native app arrived this week. Simply put, when you boot the PS4 version on a PS5, it'll essentially run the PS4 Pro codebase, albeit with a few tweaks. Namely, you get soft upgrades like a move to 60fps rather than 30 on Pro. Also, just by running from the PS5's speedier storage, load times are improved this way. More on that later, but the point is, even without the full PS5 native app, Genshin runs better on a PS5. The arrival of the native app just means a tighter, closer tailoring to the system's specs, with some clear advantages. First up then, the graphics comparisons. We're going with the PS4 Pro version on left, running on an actual Pro machine rather than via backcompat. And on right of course, it's PS5's shiny new native app. The curious thing, it turns out each of these versions runs at a full 3840x2160. Yes, that's right, even PS4 Pro has 4K support in its current build. It makes core image quality identical between the two in practice. Now, around the game's release, fellow tech YouTube channel VG Tech revealed pixel counts at 3360x2160 for Pro, a chop to horizontal detail essentially. But as far and wide as we can test in the current build, it's seemingly changed, with PS4 Pro's output at 4K resolving to a 1:1 pixel match on both axes. Again, it means PS5's touted 4K upgrades aren't really such a revelation in comparison, though it's a huge leap from the 1080p used on base PS4. Okay, next, the number one visual upgrade for Genshin is in draw distances. Level of detail for geometry is boosted, giving landscapes higher LOD meshes at a greater range. So for example, the cliffs, the walls circling Mondstadt's city centre, and even trees manifest with higher quality variants at range. Everything renders to a matching quality up close of course, but draw distances are vastly improved on PS5. Perhaps one of the best examples is the shot of the castle walls. Even textures are slow to load on the PS4 Pro edition here. We're moving to PS5, everything is fully fleshed out from afar. The same applies to trees and objects across the scene, less pop-in and more detail in view at any given point. A really great result. Of course, it's worth saying that booting the PS4 version on PS5 gives the same draw distances as it does on a PS4 Pro. It's the same code in that sense, but with 60fps unlocked. But is there anything else to the native PS5 app? Well, Genshin's opening sections resolve at the same detail. It's kind of expected, but the flat texturing used for cel shading characters means PS5 doesn't really have much scope for improving detail on the core cast. And likewise, environmental texturing, water shaders, alpha effects, and shadows appear identical to the PS4 Pro setting. Now, the developer has stated certain areas further into the game, such as the Qingyun Peak region, do have improved textures on the PS5 app, but for the broader overview of the world, the biggest advantage visually on PS5 is easily in its boosted draw distances. And it must be said, looking to the frame rates in the opening areas around Mondstadt, the Unity engine's been pushed far enough. To start off with PS4 Pro, for a little context, it's clear Genshin's been in a real need for a performance boost on last gen. Between the open world layout, the 4K visuals, and extra dynamics like a day-night cycle, targeting 30 FPS is a struggle for PS4 Pro months after launch. Now, parts can run well enough at 30 in fairness, so let's show the positives first. Interior dungeon areas are less affected by drops for sure. But even here you can see flashes of drops still creeping in, once all 4 characters cast their elemental attacks. The core appeal of Genshin is to be able to switch between your chosen 4 heroes, but PS4 Pro does seem to struggle with this mechanic, and also the alpha effects building up from attacks. Now, PS4 Pro takes a turn for the worse when we turn to the open world. Take the action outside, and it becomes an even bigger struggle for the enhanced machine to hold 30 FPS. Worse still, if we wander through any major city like Mondstadt, we're often veering closest to the 20 FPS line. Now, I have tried to force the PS4 Pro to run at 1920 by 1080 native by setting the console output to 1080p, but it still doesn't solve the issue here. Resolution, it seems, isn't the bottleneck, which instead points to Pro's CPU or possibly slower storage access being part of the issue. Either way, the manner in which Genshin uses the Unity engine is hammering the last-gen machine. We need a solution, and the PS5 version has one. Here it is then, Genshin on PS5 running at 60 FPS in its native app. It's a relief to see, and that early tutorial segment plus early dungeons do hold to 60 pretty tightly all round. The reality is though, we're still staring at a very uneven level of performance on the whole. Even after tailoring the game to PS5's much faster CPU and optimizing around its faster storage, there's plenty of huge drops, right down to the 40 FPS line. All signs point to a game that perhaps should have launched with a 30 FPS cap, or at least an option. This Mondstadt run-through shows one of the worst cases. Honestly, I didn't expect this game to still be languishing at this point in the graph, and whole battles can really buckle under the weight of too many attacks. Sure, it's a huge boost on PS4 Pro, but I can't help but feel optimization for the hardware is still falling very short of its promise. Roaming Genshin's world can still be a sub 60 FPS experience then, though at least dungeons do fare a lot better. What would solve this is some form of VRR support of course, but as of right now it's not a system level option on PS5. What we do have though is a set of other ideas, potentially to fix the frame rate. I tried everything I could to lock my PS5 to 60 FPS, but honestly with little success. The first thing I tried was going to the game's graphics menu and toggling the VSync option to off. VSync is engaged by default, but by allowing for tearing, the PS5 should in theory allow frames to render in a partial state as quickly as they're available, rather than waiting for a full frame to render within a 16.7 millisecond window. Sure enough, the frame time graph on left evens out this way, but it comes at a huge cost to image quality. Screen tearing runs up and down the picture, and running through the marker area, the game's very obviously still in the mid-40s, no better than with VSync enabled. Okay, so attempt 2. Let's try the PS4 version on PS5 to see if it's any better. This is essentially back compat plus. We lose all those draw distance improvements, but the 4K image is still there from the Pro version. And of course, this runs unlocked to 60 FPS, so we're not losing out there. I ran a side-by-side test here to get some firm proof of which is better, the PS4 version running in back compat on PS5 on left, and the native PS5 app on right. And well, the results speak for themselves. Mondstadt runs here with little to no difference. There's some small variances, but the line is largely identical. There's virtually no gain either side for big city areas or open world environments. If you're hoping to squeeze back some performance by using the PS4 version, then you're out of luck. As a last gasp attempt to fix the frame rate, I also tried setting the PS5 to 1080p output to try fix the resolution, but it really had no impact on the general reading. In battle and travel, you'll still see these big sub 60 FPS drops at the same points. The state of the frame rate on PS5 is in need of work then. Clearly pushing for better LODs on the native app and a 4K resolution changes very little for performance either way, and we're perhaps looking at deeper, systemic issues with how the Unity engine's used. Either way, one success we can point out in the PS5 release is in loading times. Yes, Genshin's map is a vast space littered with waypoints you can use to teleport around. So loading times and their length is quite a big deal to the experience, and I'm happy to say PS5 shows a big gain here. Leaving a temple to emerge to the open world, for example, takes just 2 seconds on PS5's native app, whereas running the PS4 version via backcompat takes just over 8 seconds by comparison, while PS4 Pro takes a much longer 20 seconds overall. It's repeatable in later areas too. Entering and leaving buildings shows a similar improvement across the board. Overall then, Genshin Impact has buckets of charm, with slick, well-designed combat, though optimization on PS5 and PS4 consoles still clearly needs work. As a free-to-play game, there's really no harm checking it out, of course. If you can look past the performance level, it's a surprisingly well-crafted RPG all round, but going into the PS5 edition, I really did expect more. The biggest twist for me in researching this piece is a Switch version is even understood to be in the works. Given the turnout on PS4 consoles, I'd be very curious to see how that turns out if it materializes. But for now, developer Mihayo appears to have its focus still on Sony's new machine. The game is adjusted for the DualSense's vibration, but the team has said more features of the controller will be used down the line after more testing. Perhaps, just perhaps, it means the adaptive triggers will get used after another update. Either way, it's a positive sign to see the studio going on to give Genshin more attention on PS5. There may be hope yet to hit a more solid 60 FPS down the line, but for now, that's all I have for this tech breakdown. If you did find this video useful in any way, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell to get notifications as any new video lands. To get a high quality version of this video and many more extras, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net. And to get in touch with myself or the rest of the team, just use Twitter as usual. But from me for now, thanks for watching.